All right, let's dive into something pretty big here. I mean, really big. We're talking about corporate power. And specifically, how these pharmaceutical companies can really sway public health policies. Ever get that feeling like, ooh,
Mhm.
like somebody's calling the shots about your health, and you don't even know who it is? Well, today we're going to try to figure out who and how. We've got legal analyses, investigative reports, even a suggestion to make a whole podcast about this topic. Clearly, people are worried, and they have every right to be. We're talking about laws that protect those companies from lawsuits, even if something goes wrong with their products. And we're going to talk about those secret contracts between governments and corporations, the ones that we never get to see. So buckle up. This is a deep dive into who is really looking out for your health.
You know, it's really striking how often we just assume public health is this separate thing. That's protected from corporate interests, but the reality is, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals, they're deeply intertwined.
Yeah. It's like that old saying, follow the money, right? Our sources lay out this whole concept. It's called regulatory capture, where industries can essentially write the rules that are supposed to be governing them. Talk about a fox guarding the henhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And one glaring example of this is the PRP Act. This law actually gives blanket liability protection to these companies, particularly when it comes to things like vaccines and emergency treatments. So basically, in a crisis, they're essentially free from consequences, even if their products end up causing harm.
Wait, so you're telling me they get a free pass even if things go wrong? That sounds incredibly risky, like a recipe for companies to just start cutting corners. What is the logic behind that?
Well, the argument is that it speeds up the process of getting essential medications and treatments out there, especially during emergencies. But on the other hand, without accountability, companies might be way more likely to just prioritize profit over safety, knowing they're shielded from those lawsuits.
So it's a gamble with public health. No wonder there's this erosion of trust, especially during something like a pandemic, when people are already on edge. Speaking of shady dealings, what about all those secret government contracts our sources keep mentioning?
Well, that lack of transparency is a huge problem. If the public doesn't know what kind of deals are being struck, how can they possibly trust the decisions that are being made?
About their own health.
Right. Our source material makes a pretty bold suggestion. They say we should interview whistleblowers. People who've seen this corporate influence firsthand, and they're actually willing to speak up about it. It's kind of like what investigative journalists do to expose the truth.
Exactly. Those insider accounts can be so valuable. They can provide concrete evidence
Right.
of how this influence actually plays out behind closed doors.
Okay, let's get real for a second. Imagine you need a medication, a life-saving medication, but it's priced so high because of patents and all that you just can't afford it. That's the reality for a lot of people. It really is. And it highlights how the current system often focuses on just treating illness, not actually preventing it in the first place. And it really makes you question who profits from a system that thrives on people actually being sick. That's a question we need to ask ourselves.
That's a really good point. Our sources offer some solutions to all of this. And it really comes down to giving power back to the people.
Yeah. Direct democracy is a powerful idea. Imagine citizens actually having a direct say in health policies, making sure those policies reflect the needs of the people that they're actually supposed to serve.
That would be amazing. Think about it. Getting involved in local movements, demanding more transparency from those elected officials, even organizing recalls or supporting referendums on those critical health issues.
Exactly. It's about flipping the script, making corporations accountable to the public, not the other way around.
I love that. I also love this other idea. Community-based health initiatives, where communities take charge of their own well-being. They rely less on big corporations, and they take a more holistic approach to health. What would something like that look like?
Well, you can imagine community gardens, fitness programs, support groups for mental health, people coming together to actually prioritize well-being collectively, not just individually. It's a big shift from the current system, which often feels very profit-driven.
It sounds like it. Empowering communities to take ownership of their own health. That's a game changer. What other solutions do our sources suggest?
Well, one of the most radical ideas is this concept of open source medical research. What if we could actually remove the profit motive from medical knowledge? Imagine the advancements we could make if research findings were just freely shared, allowing everyone access to those discoveries, especially the ones that could save lives.
Okay, that's a pretty mind-blowing idea. No more patents locking away potential cures just because of profit margins. It's like the whole scientific community coming together for the greater good of humanity. I like it. But let's face it, right now the system seems designed to protect those corporations. not the people. Our sources dive into this whole web of laws that make it almost impossible to hold them accountable, even when there's clear evidence of harm. What's the deal with that?
Well, it really comes down to this legal concept called limited liability. It basically shields corporations from being fully responsible for damages or debts beyond their initial investment.
So let me get this straight. If a company releases a drug and it has terrible side effects, their liability might be capped, no matter how much damage they cause.
Yeah, that's the argument against these sweeping liability protections. While limited liability can encourage investment and drive innovation, critics say it creates what's called a moral hazard. Companies might not be as motivated to prioritize safety if they know their financial risk is limited.
It's like they're playing with people's lives and getting away with it. Our sources suggest we need some serious legal reform. They talk about limiting immunity, especially when there's proof of negligence or misconduct, like, take responsibility for your actions.
Right, that idea really resonates with the need to restore public trust. If people believe that these corporations can operate without consequences, faith in the entire system just crumbles.
Yeah, it makes sense. It also discourages people from seeking justice when they've been harmed. It's like the system is rigged against them.
Absolutely. The sources also talk about strengthening compensation programs for people who have been injured by vaccines or medical treatments.
That's important because even with liability protections in place, there should at least be a clear way to help those who have suffered. What about the programs that already exist?
Well, there are programs like the Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program, or CICP, that are designed to help people injured by certain vaccines. But our sources point out that these programs are often underfunded, incredibly difficult to navigate, and they require a ton of evidence. Getting compensation through those programs is a real struggle for a lot of people.
So not only might you be harmed by a product, but then you face this bureaucratic nightmare just to get help. That's adding insult to injury.
It really is, and it highlights the need for a system that truly values individual well-being and holds those corporations accountable for their actions. It's not about demonizing companies. It's about having a system that incentivizes ethical behavior and prioritizes people's health.
Okay, so we've laid out some pretty serious problems here. What can actually be done to address this imbalance of power? Where do we even begin?
Well, our sources have some interesting ideas. One of them focuses on reining in corporate lobbying and campaign contributions, especially within the healthcare industry.
That's a big one. We know these companies, especially pharma, pour tons of money into influencing politicians
Yeah.
and shaping policy decisions. It's like they're buying their way into power.
Yeah, and that influence has a direct impact on public health. Think about it. Lobbying can delay stricter safety regulations or push through approvals for drugs. That might not meet rigorous safety standards. It's a dangerous game, and the public is often left in the dark.
It feels like a rigged system where money talks louder than the voices of the people
Yeah.
who are actually affected by these decisions.
Exactly. Another issue the sources point to is this revolving door phenomenon. You have people constantly moving between government regulatory agencies and the industries they're supposed to be regulating.
Isn't that a huge conflict of interest?
Mm.
How can we trust regulators to be impartial if they're hoping to land a high-paying job in the industry they're supposed to be overseeing?
You're absolutely right. It erodes public trust, and it raises serious questions about whose interests are truly being served. It's a recipe for corruption, and it undermines the entire system.
So if the system is stacked against us, what can regular people actually do to push for change? How do we reclaim our power and make sure our voices are heard?
It might sound simple, but one powerful tool is our collective voice. By supporting organizations and initiatives that advocate for corporate accountability and stronger public health protections, we can amplify the message and demand action from our elected officials. It's about making it clear that we won't tolerate a system that puts profits before people.
So it's about getting involved, finding those groups that align with our values, and making our voices heard. What else can we do? It feels like such a massive problem.
Well, we can also choose to support businesses and organizations that prioritize ethical practices and transparency. Voting with our wallets can send a powerful message. If enough people turn away from companies engaged in shady practices, it hits them where it hurts, their bottom line.
It's like taking our power back as consumers and saying, we won't support businesses that prioritize profit over people's well-being.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices
Yeah,
and aligning our spending with our values.
exactly. And just as important, we need to stay informed by understanding how corporate power operates and recognizing its impact on our lives. We become more empowered to demand change.
Knowledge is power, right? The more we know about these systems, the better equipped we are to challenge them and fight for a healthier future. We've definitely uncovered some unsettling stuff about how these corporate interests can really hijack public health. But our sources don't just leave us hanging. They give us some hope, too. They offer some pretty compelling solutions, ways we can reclaim our power and build a health system that actually puts people first.
Yeah. One of the most exciting ideas is this shift from treatment to prevention. Right now, the system feels kind of like a revolving door. Pharmaceutical companies are making money by managing illnesses instead of stopping them in the first place.
Right. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Yeah.
Our sources are really pushing for a more holistic approach to health, focusing on those root causes of illness.
Exactly. They suggest exploring alternative health models that prioritize preventative care, things like nutrition, lifestyle changes, mental well-being, alongside conventional medicine. It's about treating the whole person, not just the symptoms.
I like that. It's like finally addressing the underlying issues. Instead of just masking the pain, imagine communities taking charge of their health through things like community gardens, fitness programs, and mental health support groups.
That's the idea behind decentralized healthcare. Instead of relying solely on big pharma and these massive medical institutions, we can empower those local communities to manage their own health needs.
It's about taking ownership. One source even suggests creating a public pharmaceutical option. Essentially, it would be a nonprofit, publicly funded entity that develops and distributes essential medications without the pressure of maximizing profits.
That's a really interesting idea. It could be a total game changer for making sure that everyone has access to affordable medications, especially those who are currently priced out of the market. It levels the playing field.
Yeah.
And it puts people's well-being ahead of corporate greed.
Okay, so we've got community-based initiatives, a public pharmaceutical option. What else is on the table?
Well, remember that open source medical research we were talking about? Investing in that could revolutionize healthcare if we can remove the barriers of patents and intellectual property. We could accelerate innovation and make those life-saving discoveries available to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay.
Wow, that's the kind of future I want to live in. A world where scientific breakthroughs benefit all of humanity, not just those who can afford it. Our sources paint a pretty inspiring picture of what's possible if we just dare to imagine a different kind of healthcare system.
And these aren't just pie-in-the-sky ideas either. These are concrete solutions that are being explored and implemented in different parts of the world. It's about taking those ideas, adapting them to our own communities, and pushing for change.
It can feel overwhelming sometimes to think about taking on these massive systems. But our sources remind us, change starts with a vision, a belief that a better system is possible.
And it's so important to remember that we each have a role to play in making that vision a reality.
Absolutely. Whether it's joining local advocacy groups, supporting candidates who prioritize public health, or just having informed conversations with our friends and family, every action we take contributes to that collective movement for change.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with a sense of hope. Yes, the challenges are real, and the systems are complex, but there's a growing awareness of these issues and a desire for something better.
That's what keeps me going. We've explored some pretty dark corners of the corporate world and how it impacts public health. But we've also seen a path toward a future where people's well-being truly comes first.
I'll leave you with this. If you had the power to reshape these public health policies, what would be your top priorities? What changes would you make to ensure that healthcare is accessible, affordable, and truly serves the needs of the people?
That's a great question for everyone to think about. Keep exploring these issues and find ways to make your voice heard. Remember, knowledge is power, and you've got the insights now to navigate this complex world. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay informed,